appreciate y'all turning out. And my name is Richard Bledsoe. I've been serious about painting for about 35 years now. And when I say serious, I mean it's actually a source of great joy to me. I've had such a lifetime of exhilaration following this pursuit. And I figured the way to talk about my art is to tell you my own story. Because I never knew when I was growing up that I was going to become a painter. But I started off, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I lived in Virginia. And in Virginia, the art school they had there back in the 80s was called Virginia Commonwealth University. And it was in Richmond, Virginia. I lived in Manassas, Virginia. I was in a suburb of Washington, D.C. So that was my idea of a big city, was Washington. And my family went into Washington all the time. We would go to the Air and Space Museum and look at all the airplanes. We'd go into the Natural History Museum, see the dinosaur bones. We never went to the art museums. But when I went into Washington as a teenager with my punk rock buddies, we would go to the mall and walk around. We actually went into the Hirshhorn Art Museum. And while we were there, I saw paintings by a painter named Francis Bacon. And they were haunting. They had these kind of skeletal forms floating inside these barely suggested human figures. And I'd never seen anything like that. And something resonated with me. But at the time, I didn't think much of it, just walked away. But when I went to Virginia Commonwealth University to try to learn how to be a filmmaker, they started you out in an art foundation program where they explored all the different mediums, all the different techniques. They gave you a taste of everything to see what you liked. And an early assignment that I had was the first painting I ever really made. I've been in high school art classes, but I've never painted anything. We had an assignment to translate a color photograph into a black and white reproduction. And I picked this toothy reef fish picture that I had, vividly colored. And I have this memory of laying on the floor of my dorm room. I was probably still 17 years old at the time because I went to college when I was 17. And I painted this fish over and over and over again. And it was like magic how it would change based on the way that I was putting the paint on this piece of mat board, which is like kind of a white artist-grade cardboard. And I really was fascinated by this process. Once again, didn't know how significant it would end up being. But that was my first taste. The problem with going through the art foundation program, wanting to be a filmmaker, at the time, in the 80s, if you wanted to be a filmmaker, you had to go through the commercial arts program of Virginia Commonwealth University. And this is pre-computer, if you can wrap your mind around such a thing. If you wanted to do graphic design, it had to be done by hand. To do text for an advertisement, you had to take this stuff called press type, which was a sheet that you would rub letters off of. You had to line them up perfectly, level, with the right spacing between them. I would have had to have spent another year doing classes like that before I ever got to take a filmmaking class. So after my art foundation experience, it's like, no way am I going into commercial art and doing press type for a year. I decided I'll try to get into filmmaking by going through theater. So I studied theater for a year and learned how hard it is to work collaboratively with other people. Because when you're in theater, you don't start off being the director. You're the person who is directed. You're the person who's following the orders. And the egos and the drama and the amazing politics of the place really turned me off. So I was like, well, I'm not doing that. Then I thought maybe I'll write my way into the movies. So I spent a year studying English, writing intensive, and I wrote like crazy. But something was haunting me all this time. It was the memories of the paintings that I had done when I was in that art foundation class. And ultimately I decided that's what I needed to do with my life. I realized that I had opened something in myself by doing these paintings, so I decided to major in that. So I didn't want to just go into it slapdash. See, VCU was known as a progressive school. They really favored abstract art and conceptual art. So all my colleagues in class are just smearing paint around, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to learn the skills. So I was setting up still lifes, painting from observation, painting from models. I would grid off photos and try to reproduce them accurately. So I was really trying to learn the skills. And so I didn't get much positive commentary during my critiques because it wasn't what the people were into, but I was learning the skills. But that was in 1990 when I committed to go back to study painting. It wasn't until the fall of 1992 that things changed for me. I was walking home from class one day. I had a day-long painting class. I lived nearby, I had an apartment, and I was walking home from my lunch break when the first vision came. I was singing a song. The band Pink Floyd, everyone knows Pink Floyd, and what most people don't know is the original singer, songwriter, and guitarist of Pink Floyd was a guy named Syd Barrett. He did so many drugs, he went insane and had to be removed from the band. I have a solo album he recorded after he went insane, and it's very haunting to say the least. So I was singing a Syd Barrett song as I walked home, and I'm a terrible singer, but I was all alone and I was just enjoying myself. And this song was called Octopus, and it was sort of a surreal vision of a carnival scene. So I'm singing this song walking home, and suddenly there was a picture in my mind, but it wasn't just any picture, it was a painting. I saw a painting completed in my mind, not something that I was having to reproduce by looking from another picture. It was something that was vented, something that bubbled up from my unconscious. And it was an octopus. It was not a carnival. It was a literal red octopus where the body of it looked sort of like a human brain, and it was in this hellish red landscape. And looking back on it now, I understand this wasn't just an octopus. This was Leviathan. This was Cthulhu. This was Kali. It was all these things. It was this powerful force of destruction. And the way that I painted it would demonstrate that. I say this in retrospect, because at the time it's just like, wow, what a cool painting I imagined. I did not know that was going to become my method. From that point on, most of the artwork that I have created has come from visions that are presented to me at the most random moments. I could be washing the dishes or driving home from work, and suddenly there's a picture in my mind. And these days I normally get it with the title and the dimensions and suggestions for technique. I've got a book where I write these down. All I need to do is write down the title and like a one-line description, and that usually is enough to re-invoke the image in my mind. I will never live long enough to paint all the ideas that I have in this book, and they just keep coming. I could go for months without having any, but then I'll get like 7 or 8 in a row. They just fire off, and I get ideas for paintings that are part of the same series, but they may come years apart. They don't, and then only later do I recognize the connections between them and make them part of the same ongoing exploration. And so these paintings, they're like dreams in that they're full of meaning, but it's not obvious meaning, it's symbolic meaning. These paintings are telling us things about life and our culture and existence in an oblique way. It is a language of mythology that's bubbling up from within me. And I feel this is an actual blessing that I have been given, that I am presented with these images. And the point of these images is to show them to you. You should see these things as well. I am not trying to reproduce the natural world. I want to show you the world within. And with this, I'm not a filmmaker, but I get to show you stills from the movies that are playing inside my mind. And because of the meaning of these bubbling up from the unconscious, it is shared meaning. Patrons will come up to me and tell me things about my own paintings that I didn't even recognize. And when I get to see my artwork through their eyes, I learn about them and I learn about myself at the same time. And that is a real gift to have that kind of insight. And that is what I had to say. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sure.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes.
Do you have a theme? Do you follow themes, or are they all the same?
There are certain repetitive themes in my works. For a while, I was inspired by, when we were first digging up dinosaurs, we didn't really know what they looked like, so we were putting them together in all sorts of awkward combinations. That fired my imagination. I have a whole series of, like, erroneous dinosaurs that haunted me. I also say that I'm into the mysterious America. Things like Bigfoot and the hoop snake and tall tales, and sort of like the Twilight Zone, but the kind of the Americana version of it also haunts my paintings and recurs naturally. And ultimately, it's all about God. It's all coming from these visions, which I can only credit to the Holy Spirit. Messages to the culture about the nature of life that you can't get any other way other than painting. The making of it and appreciation of it, I feel, is something that has been with us as long as we've been humanity. As I often say, we've been making paintings longer than we've been planting crops. Art happened before agriculture. And I feel like these are my cave paintings, that I am trying to tap into that same energy where you both show something that is recognizable, but something that is also beyond simultaneously. Any other questions?
How come you're so cute?
Oh, sorry. That's my wife. She's biased.
I'm biased.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes, sure.
If you don't mind.
Don't mind.
Do you find that your paintings tap into like larger things in America, and do they have like are they sort of prophetic? Do things in their paintings?
I do believe there is a streak of prophecy that I have experienced in my paintings, and the example that I like to give, in March of 2019, I completed a painting that I called The Conspirators. And I painted these two figures that were kind of in these bodysuits, and they had these big, weird, elaborate face masks on. And one of them was holding up a little tiny mechanical device in his big gloved hand. I didn't know what it meant. A year later, COVID hit. And the conspiracy behind that, I believe that was a moment of prophecy I had. You don't know these things, but when you are cutting into the unconscious and you're following the things that bubble up, you are probably getting echoes of things that are to come. I do believe that. And there's been other examples, but that's the most prominent one to me, where I had these ideas, these people sealed in with masks and gloves and working with something that was dangerous and conspiratorial. All right. Anybody else? Well, it's been a pleasure having you all here. I sure appreciate your time. And thank you for being at the Peoria second Saturday.